This episode of MoneyWeek Talks is brought to you by Lion Trust. Lion Trust is an investment manager that believes in the power of being actively different.
I'm not a numbers person or numbers aren't for me.
Yeah.
I really want to say, no, they are for you. Everyone can be a numbers person.
Hello, I'm Kalpana, digital editor of MoneyWeek. Welcome to MoneyWeek Talks. MoneyWeek's motto is to make it, keep it, spend it. And in each episode, we help you do just that with our top guests who come with incredible insight and views. Whether you're looking to make sense of your finances, make more money, or just want to understand the world of investing better, then this is for you. In this episode, I have the pleasure to be joined by the former Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak. Prior to becoming the leader of the Conservatives, he was Chancellor, and many people will not forget how he helped millions through financial difficulty through his furlough scheme back in 2020. His desire to help people with their finances and understanding the economy better has not stopped. And as such, earlier this year, Rishi and his wife Akshata launched the Richmond Project, a charity dedicated to improve numeracy skills for everyone of every age. Welcome, Rishi. Thank you for joining me. So tell me about the Richmond Project, how it works, its mission, and why you launched it.
Well, Kalpana, first of all, thanks very much for having me on your show. It's great to be able to spend a little bit of time with you. And you know, the idea for the Richmond Project really came about when I left office last year. Akshata and I were talking together about how we could, keep contributing, keep making a difference in the areas that we cared about. Education has always been something that both of us are passionate about as a way to help people live more fulfilling lives. And we kind of zeroed in on this idea of giving people confidence with numbers. Both of us really, when people say, I'm not a numbers person or numbers aren't for me,
Yeah.
I really want to say, no, they are for you. Everyone can be a numbers person. I passionately believe that, regardless of who you are, your background, we can make numbers more accessible, give people more confidence with numbers. And that's really what the Richmond Project is about. It's giving people everywhere more confidence with everyday numbers so that they can live more fulfilling lives. And, that is because numbers matter to us, whatever we do, whatever our job is, going about our day-to-day life. And that confidence, if we can help people with it, will really, I think, unlock huge opportunities and possibilities for people and their families, and particularly in the area that you're very passionate about, which is financial literacy. Because if you give people that confidence with numbers, then those are the foundations and the building blocks for them to be able to make better decisions around savings and budgeting and investing. So really, it's kind of foundational for many aspects of life, but particularly when it comes to financial planning and literacy.
And can I just ask why it's called the Richmond Project?
Well, my constituency is in North Yorkshire, and is called the Richmond constituency, now the Richmond and Northallerton constituency. So that's where our home up in North Yorkshire is, and it's a place that's very meaningful to us and is a big part of our life, and we feel very fortunate to be a part of the community there. And we wanted the name of our charity to reflect that. And this is a special part in our life, and this charity is going to be a big part of our life going forward. And it's nice that the name of our charity, takes its name from our constituency home, which, as I said, is a place we feel a deep connection to and has done an enormous amount for me. And also, by the way, Richmond is the most copied UK place name internationally. So there are more than 50 Richmonds all around the world.
Great.
So it's another great British export is the name Richmond.
Love that.
But no, that's what the charity is about, and it's going to focus on funding programs and activities here in the UK that support our mission. Over time, I think we might also develop our own programs as we learn more. And the first project that we're doing is actually something we've just kicked off called Number Nation, which is the biggest ever survey of people in the UK, asking them about their attitudes towards things like numeracy and financial literacy. We're going to talk to over 10,000 people of all ages, and that will really give us, I think, a baseline to figure out where to direct our energy, actually, because listening to people first, learning from them will help us make sure that what we're doing can be as helpful as and effective as possible.
Yeah, it makes sense, understanding what the fears and anxiety are
Exactly.
around it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a charity that's built from true passion. I feel it.
Good.
So one thing, just sort of touching on this fear and anxiety. So people often see maths and money as the same thing. So when I tell them talking to them about, their attitude towards money, and they say I'm not good with numbers, I try to say to them, like, actually try not to think of maths and money as the same thing. But so I like to see them as different things, because you don't need maths to join your company pension scheme or to get started with investing. But should they be the same thing, maths and financial education? Do they really go hand in hand?
I think they are connected. And if you think about it, it starts with confidence. It's just having confidence around numbers or numerical concepts.
Yeah.
And then that actually helps lead to ability and ability to understand some of these concepts. And then that means that then you can make better practical decisions. Where should I put my savings, or when should I start saving, or how do I budget for my family, or saving for a particular holiday? How do I compare this investment with that investment, or which mortgage deal is the best deal for me? So that's how I think about it. The confidence leads to ability, and then leads to better practical decision making. And one thing that I've realized over time is how important confidence is. Yeah. And it's really striking that, particularly around numbers, people just start with a sense that some people are numbers people and some people aren't. As I was saying before, that people think it's not for me. And I don't think that's right. I genuinely believe, and the research will bear this out as well, that everyone can be a numbers person, and that's what we want to help with. Now, you mentioned financial literacy and these concepts. There's a professor at Stanford, which is a university in America that I studied at, and there's a professor there called Professor Lusardi, and she is one of the world's experts on financial education. And what she figured out, actually, I think almost 20 years ago, that there are 3 really foundational questions that you can ask people to understand how financially literate and confident they are. Mm-hmm. And those 3 questions concern almost the building blocks of financial planning. One of them is about compound interest, which I know you've written about in your books as well. The second one was about inflation and how inflation affects us. And the third one is about risk and diversification. And she's figured out that those 3 questions alone are a sufficient guide for us to understand how financially literate a population is, or an individual is. And she's tested that all across the world. And what's really interesting in her results is, women in particular are much less likely to say that they know the answers to those questions. But then when you push them to give the answers, they actually end up doing better than men. And I thought it's a really interesting observation about how confidence is important. And hopefully we at the Richmond Project can help give people that confidence. And if they have the confidence, then obviously there are some concepts that you need to understand, and that will then help you make all these better decisions around budgeting, investing, saving, and the like.
And what you're saying actually really resonates with quite a lot of research that I've seen about women when it comes to investing. They don't do it, but when they do it better than men.
Better than the men, as in so many other things. And that's why I said it's something that I've really been struck by. That's why this confidence part of it is really important. And we want to make sure people have confidence, because that will then unlock the ability that they actually have, and they just don't realise it yet.
Yeah, and I get that, because actually when I speak to people and we talk to them about money, first thing they'll just say, I'm just no good with numbers, no good with maths, and that's it. That's the barrier.
Yeah, that's the barrier, and that is actually at our charity. We really want to break down that barrier, and you put it really well. That people put that barrier up, and you did it with your hand, and we want to be in there saying, let's break that barrier down, because everyone can have this confidence, and then in any which way, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's saving for a holiday, whether it's weekly shop, whether it's helping your kids with homework, whether it's doing recipes for the bake-off, whatever it is, you will find a way. that you can put this to good use in your life, and it will help you.
To everyday life, right?
Exactly.
Speaking of financial literacy and education, so there has been, over the past few years, a lot of lobbying from a lot of organisations, journalists and even teachers about having financial education in schools for primary age children. So research from Cambridge University does show that children start forming money habits as young as age 7. So the sooner we start, the better. So kids leave school knowing about debt, funnily enough, but no one tells them about mortgages, no one tells them what a pension is and why you should start saving for one, or how credit cards can work to your advantage. So I do acknowledge that you did introduce maths to 18. Why did you not introduce financial education when you were Prime Minister?
Yeah. So look, education is something that I've always been passionate about, as we were talking about a little bit earlier. And, whilst I did some things when I was in government, the Richmond Project as a charity now, its focus is not on curriculum reform in the same way. I'm out of government now, and what we're trying to do is break down these barriers and help change the culture around this. And I think it's important to acknowledge that schools do a lot, and teachers are working very hard to do a lot, and we can see the improvements that particularly around maths in recent years because of all their hard work. Now, there are organisations actually that are working with teachers to provide exactly the type of financial education that you mentioned. I've quite enjoyed on occasion in Yorkshire at home taking part in some of these classes where we've done fun workshops with kids around savings and mortgages, and I can see how excited they are about it. And these organisations are doing a great job, and actually our charity, the Richmond Project, is talking to a range of organisations that are working in this space to see if there are opportunities to support them where it might make sense. But what I would say actually is, taking a step back, wouldn't it be great if we could make numbers and that confidence around these concepts to do with financial education so accessible that they feel like they're for people even outside of the classroom, that it's not something that just has to be done in the classroom. It's so accessible that it can be incorporated into their everyday life. I think that would be really powerful. And I think trying to almost meet people where they are, which is a bit of advice that we've been given about how we think about our charity and how it operates, I think is a good bit of advice. And it's something that I'm thinking about, and I reflect on my own childhood. And the thing that really sparked my interest in all these things was actually working for my mum in her shop, in her pharmacy. And first of all, I would be working in the back and counting out tablets. And, there was, in those days, you didn't have everything in standardized packets or machines that did it automatically. So you would literally have to measure things out and count things out. And then I got involved in the business side of it. And one of my first jobs was literally to just count up all the coins in the till at the end of every day and sort them into little bags, and then they had to be dropped off at the bank. And then I started doing the bookkeeping as well and tallying everything that happened in the business. And actually that really, for me, unlocked lots of interest and engagement, and because it connected me with the business side of things. And I found that was a great way for me as a young person to get more confidence with all these concepts. And then we had to think about all these financial concepts in the context of a small business. But it started literally being there counting out the coins or counting out the tablets. And every child will have a different way into it. But I think the broader reflection I have is, of course, what happens in schools is important, but actually we want to make this so accessible for people that it can be something that they engage with practically in their everyday lives. And I think that is as important for young people as it is for everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely get that. And it's amazing actually what you're saying, where what I was saying earlier, that you learn from your family essentially. Yeah. And I'll tell you a funny story about my dad. I don't know if he'll appreciate me telling you this, but he did have a shop, and he'd deliberately give people pennies as their change, because he knew like certain customers just throw them away because they didn't value the penny. And then he'd get my brother and I to go out there and pick them all up, and just the idea was just like, every penny matters. So and I kind of, that instilled savings habit into me. And then obviously to talk to me about interest rates and stuff, and I just became obsessed. I wouldn't say I'm a maths whiz. My maths teacher did throw me off algebra very fast, but yeah. So you learn so much from the family home, but it was part of our everyday life. We saw it as fun, and that was the main thing.
Exactly.
That we didn't see it as hard work. It was like, okay, yeah, this is really fun. So yeah, there's so much to learn from the parents. And as I mentioned earlier, research from Cambridge University does actually show that children start forming money habits as young as 7.
Yeah, you mentioned, which will come as a surprise to people, I think, that it happens as early as it does.
Yeah, I'd say probably younger, actually. Little children are so engaged, so you give them a bit of money and they know exactly what it is. How does the Richmond Project as a charity help families? Are you able to give some examples?
Yeah, and this is something we've been spending a lot of time thinking about. And part of our early work is to figure out which organisations are doing what in the space, because our instinct is that we can really help when it comes to young families in particular. I think we all know, for example, like if those of us who are parents and have had young kids, as you and I both have, I think we all know it's really important to read to your kids every night. Mm-hmm. I think that is it's kind of ingrained into us, and I think most parents really try and do that, and everyone wants the best for their kids. And then you ask people, what's the kind of numbers equivalent of that? And everyone's faces go blank, mine included. I didn't think anyone, I don't know when our kids were that age that I specifically knew what I should be doing with them, just to start building this confidence and this familiarity with numbers from a very early age, in the same way that we do with books and reading and words. And that's an area where I think we want to spend a bit of time investigating. Aksha and I visited a great charity recently in West London that works with parents who have toddlers, little ones, before they go to school, and is incorporating into their play groups and their sessions, more numbers-based activities. And in terms of practical things, it's the simple things that you do at home with your tiny little kids, just counting the steps as you walk up the stairs, or when you've got your toddler in the trolley as you're doing your shopping, and trying to incorporate some counting into things like that. Shapes are really important at that age, actually. And I was talking about this recently, but you get the pizza for dinner, and you can say, well, slice of pizza is like a triangle, and then the plate is a circle, and the box that the pizza comes in is a square, and then the napkin can be a rectangle. So again, these are the kind of very easy things that we just have to kind of remind ourselves to do with our very young children, because you're right, I think these habits form really early, and one of the things that we really want to do is figure out, well, what are the right organisations and efforts that we can support to help particularly young families build that confidence from a really early age.
Some great tips there, actually. And it's one of the challenges that I find as a parent when it comes to talking to children about money, is the fact that we live in quite a digital world now. And that can be quite challenging. So how can parents overcome that if they want to, as the children get older, because that's where the challenges start coming in?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And my wife and I have grappled with this a bit, because everything is, they've got digital accounts on their smartphones now. I mean, ours are kind of young teenagers. And actually, you have to make yourself. I mean, what we find ourselves doing is slightly forcing ourselves to get the kids to use actual cash and coins, because you can't quite beat, I don't think, just the physicality of having to think about paying for something, making sure that the change is right, and figuring out how many things you can buy with the note or with the coins. I think actually that in this digital day and age, it requires a bit of extra effort to do that. But it worked for me when I was little, and we try and do that with our kids. But as you say, I think it has to be practical. It has to become very normal. And it has to just be engaging. But I think the good thing is, for whatever reason, you almost, regardless of what kids think about maths at school, you can engage them in some of these more money-oriented concepts quite easily, I find, at home, because ultimately they're kids and they want to have things. As soon as you start making them aware that things cost money, they can't have everything, and here are some of the constraints around that, and they can earn a bit of money for doing this or pocket money there, and then suddenly it becomes quite important to them quite quickly that they understand these things. But I think you're right. Digital often makes it a little bit harder,
Very hard.
and the practical counting out of things and making change, I think, is a helpful way for kids to do this, and we certainly did that as well.
And I think also just teaching them about financial independence, I think that's so important as well. What you just said about you can't have everything that you want, but that's because there's a very important lesson to stand on your own two feet and be able to get what you want because you got it, not because someone gave it to you.
It's so interesting you say that, and I think that is absolutely right, and I've certainly seen that with my girls. The agency, really, the fact that they are in control. I mean, they think they're in control, but it's actually really helpful for getting them engaged and taking ownership of it, because it's theirs. Or they'd say, feel it. It's theirs to do what they want within reason, obviously, and that has really helped. And I think it's great, and especially that with these girls, and that sense of independence and autonomy is something we want to raise our kids with. But you're really right about that. I've found that has unlocked a lot of engagement and interest from them as soon as they realise, well, this means I'm in control of this, and that I get to do what I want with it, and that is brilliant, and this is mine, and I've earned it, and I'm going to save for a few weeks so I can get this thing over here, which mummy and daddy won't buy me, but so I'm going to do it my way. And I think that is really empowering, especially for young girls, and I've loved seeing that in them.
I'm just going to swing back to maths to 18. So when you talked about maths to 18, my children's reaction was absolutely no way, Rishi, because they did not want to do maths till they were 18.
Well, just for the record, that was my girl's reaction too, so they're not alone.
I saw some figures from the Richmond Project that states that improved numeracy would save the UK up to 25 billion a year. Can you tell me a little bit about how that would improve the UK economy? I assume we're talking about saving the UK, and how does the Richmond Project get youth to embrace numeracy? I think that's your biggest challenge, getting people to enjoy it.
Yeah, and we actually feel like we've touched on it a little bit so far, and I think the thing that with young people, it's got to be practical. I think they've got to see how it's useful to them in their everyday life, even if actually just learning foundational concepts will be very useful to them. They may not quite see that at a young age. So making it practically relevant for them is really important. And then making it feel engaging and fun as opposed to something they're being lectured to do is probably also something we have to do. Now, I've found, interestingly, when I've in schools and talking to young people about this more generally, you find out what interests people, whether it's baking, whether it's sports, whether it's being an entrepreneur and setting up a small business. There's a way to every young person through something that they anyway are interested in, gaming, right? Whatever it might be that they're interested in, it's finding that connection and then showing them how the numbers or some of the things they're learning have a relevance to that, and will make them be able to be better at it or enjoy it more, or more likely to do it when they're a little bit older, and then presenting it in a fun way. And actually, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but one of the other great visits that Aksha and I did a little while ago was a children's business fair. And these were all young kids who had set up their own small businesses, and they get to come to the high street regularly and sell their things that they had made. And it was incredibly inspiring, first of all, just seeing all these youngsters and what they'd created, and multi-talented, but all sorts of different things. And and then they come to the high street, they're selling their goods, they're showing us all their books with the accounts of how much things cost, how much profit they'd made, and chatting to them, and talking to their parents. Again, lots of those kids were kids which, if you said, you need to study more maths, they would have said, no thanks. But they didn't quite realise they were improving all their maths, because they were doing this other thing that they liked. And actually, I feel like I was just looking at it the other day. One of them had this brilliant kind of Lego pieces inside these bars of soap, and I love Star Wars, so I kind of bought some Star Wars ones of those. And there was other girls who had made these incredibly handmade little soft toys, and went on. But when I was talking to them about their business, and they were talking to me about profit margins and percentage growth and what they would do, what savings they had put all their in the money that they'd made in, they had learn all these really important concepts for life, and using percentages or fractions or growth rates without quite knowing it, because they were doing something that they really enjoyed and could see the practical application of. And I thought that, again, for those kids that worked. For other kids it will be more, how do they optimize their fantasy football team, and for someone else it will be some gaming thing. But I think it just shows me that actually you can find a way to most young people, and you just have to be a bit creative about how you do it.
Yeah, I love the idea of making numbers fun, actually. And I also love that story about entrepreneurship, because one of the things that I don't feel we encourage, the younger generation to do is actually become entrepreneurs. I think it's such an important thing. Careers at school are always talking about how to get a job, but we don't talk about entrepreneurship. And I think, again, that also comes with having that confidence with numbers to be able to say, go out there and do something for yourself because you want to, and you can because you're confident with numbers.
Exactly. So, and I find more and more young people are themselves thinking about it, which is good, because I think we do need to change the culture, as you said, around this. And I did one of those when I was a kid, when I was probably 12 or so, and in my school we had set up this little company, but this mini business that was in our design and tech lab. It was called Keylets, and we'd kind of do bubble writing and make keychains out of little bits of wood, and coloured bubble writing with someone's name or whatever they want, and make a keychain out of it. And we set this thing up, and we're running around school selling these things, and it was great until the teacher of the lab kind of came in and started saying he was going to start charging us for all the materials that we were using, that slightly changed all the margins on it. But to your point, and I think that was a really fun experience for me. But like these kids that I visited recently with Akshita, you are fundamentally learning and getting more confident with financial concepts, mathematical concepts, but you're doing it in a different way.
Yeah. Could schools do more? You mentioned earlier about, we encourage reading. So I know at the end of the summer term, there's always a reading challenge. We have World Book Day.
Yeah.
Can we introduce a World Numbers Day, actually, where people dress up as something associated with numbers? But what do you think? I know, actually, I've seen on your Instagram, you guys have so much fun. There's a number of challenges that you create. I've been thinking about slicing a cake, 3 straight cuts, 3 equal pieces.
When we're trying to half things.
Great.
Exactly.
But I'd like to see schools set more of those. But what do you think schools could do? And can they lean on the Richmond Project as well?
Yeah, I think you raise a really interesting question, right? So we have World Book Day, and we have all these reading challenges, and it speaks to how we as a society really recognise, and it's a global thing actually, not just a UK thing, as you mentioned, that reading is really important, and we celebrate it and we support it. And actually, part of what we want to do at the Richmond Project is change the culture around numbers, so that it becomes as normal to think about numbers in the way that we do reading. And I think the way you set it up, actually, with that example, is a really good illustration of the current situation and what hopefully we can help to change over time. Because it should be that we value confidence with numbers as much as we do reading as a society. I think that will really help people, and help them with their everyday lives, because numbers are everywhere. Help them with their financial planning in particular, but also help them get a better job or earn more, and give them a sense of security, and help them with their kids and homework and things. So you're absolutely right, and that, I think, we should think about how we how we do that. And that's challenge for us, but what is the equivalent of World Book Day for numbers? But and there are actually, funnily enough, and people probably don't quite realize it, is we do have we have National Numeracy Day, and we have some other times in the year where we are focused on numeracy and numbers. They probably don't have the same prominence as you described with World Book Day. But actually, probably it does make me realize actually one other thing is that stories actually are a great way to get people learning and being educated and more confident with numbers. It actually is not all about problems and mathematical problems that you need to solve. And look, you write about this as well, so you will know this well. But stories are a great way to engage people, and the research shows. And again, I talked earlier about the professor at Stanford who runs the Center for Financial Education, and the research from the academics and the universities actually shows that storytelling and stories about concepts like compound interest or inflation or risk are a really powerful way to help people. And they ran an experiment where they just explained the concepts and then got people to reply to some questions to see if they understood it, and then they repeated the experiment where they told them a story to explain the concept and then saw if they could answer the questions. And interestingly, when they told them the stories to explain the concept, people did far better afterwards. And it was an interesting insight into actually what is the best way to educate people or help them gain this confidence. And actually maybe storytelling is a better way than another problem set. And again, that's something that we'll look at a little bit at the Richmond Project.
I just have to say I agree. And actually, speaking of World Book Day, both my children for a good few years every year would go as Billionaire Boy. They'd take the toilet roll with them as well, and that's all they would ever dress up as. But there is an element of storytelling there about making money and overcoming challenges in life. So I agree, but that's the project for Richmond. Another project for Richmond Project. Yeah. How do we get the equivalent of World Book Day?
For numbers,
I want to move on to another topic that I'm super passionate about is investing. So one of my favorite quotes comes from Albert Einstein. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And when you invest, the power of compounding can be phenomenal. But around 78% of UK adults do not invest. But worse, they have around £10,000 sitting in bank accounts paying little or no interest. So I've got quite a few questions around this. So let's start with why do you think it is that people don't invest, and how would you get people to start?
I think you're right about compound interest. I think Albert Einstein was spot on about this. And when I was talking earlier about Professor Lusardi's work around the foundational concepts, the three questions that she asked to figure out if people are financially literate in a confident way, one of those questions is about compound interest and making sure that people really do understand the power of compounding, that the growth on your money compounds on itself over time, and it can be really, really powerful. And that's super important when you think about your savings and investments. I look, and I'm sure you've got other questions on this as well. What I'd say is, I think in government there's lots of focus on various policies, and something I've come to realize is government can change lots of policies. It can change this allowance, change that allowance, improve this tax incentive, that tax incentive, this bit of regulation, that bit of regulation. But actually, oftentimes that doesn't move the needle, because what you need is culture change. And that's much harder for governments to bring about. And that's why I go back to, where we started. What we want to try and achieve with the Richmond Project is this concept of confidence. And because government can change all the policies it wants and give people tax incentives to do this, or change the regulation over here to make something else easier or harder. But it can't wave a magic wand and change culture. And I think that's, when it comes to money and investing, confidence is really important. And that's why, in terms of getting people investing and thinking about investing in a different way, unless we change their confidence or give them that extra confidence with understanding these concepts, having that confidence with numbers, having understanding and having confidence with the concept of compound interest, for example, then that all the tax changes and policy changes isn't going to make any difference in the world. And that's why I think this broader culture change that we're aiming to help bring about is actually a really important prerequisite for changing that approach to investing.
Yeah, and just really understanding how it works. And I agree, for example, having a sort of higher tax incentive for stocks and shares ISA, for example, isn't going to suddenly make people put their money into that. I think I agree. It needs to be a culture change. There needs to be a boost in confidence and understand how it actually works and why, and what it does for your wealth as well. I often get people just saying things like, well, they'll steal all my money, or I'm not rich enough. So there's so many myths around it as well.
Exactly.
So I think that's quite challenging. So on the theme of investing, I just wanted to touch on the cities having a bit of a rough time, as you probably know. Companies are leaving the London Stock Exchange and there are fewer listings. In fact, we wrote about this recently on MoneyWeek, and 88 left in 2024 and there were just 18 listings. How would you revive the city again and get people to invest in UK companies?
Well, I think probably now in this new chapter of my life, I'll leave that for the policymakers and all the people who are engaged in that. But look, needless to say, I'm a big supporter of the city. And the thing I would say is that there's many things we as a country can be proud of, things that we do better than most people around the world. But our financial and professional services industry is certainly one of them. I mean, we are a global powerhouse when it comes to that industry, and there are lots of bits that make up that industry, of which the financial markets and IPOs are obviously an important part of that, but it's much broader than that as well. And it's something that everyone should feel really proud about. We do it really well. And they also need to know that it's not just about London and the Southeast. And that's, one of the, I think, underappreciated facts about the city, because we talk about the physical place, but that industry, actually, most people employed in that industry are employed outside of London and the Southeast. I think that when I last checked, something like 2/3 or more of the jobs in that sector were all spread across the country. And that's why when people think about, well, how can we improve these things or support that industry, I think it's just remembering that it's not about some people who happen to work in the square mile and an old-fashioned view of the city. This really is a UK-wide industry that is one of our great success stories. So I'm pleased that there are people focusing on how do we keep it strong and support it. Obviously, it's an industry I started my own career in. But again, it's the same thing. Again, you can change lots of policies, but actually at an individual level, comes back to having that confidence with everyday numbers and financial concepts, because without that, you're not going to be able to access all the great things that this industry might be able to offer you and your family.
Yep, makes absolute good sense. And so I've been told you're super busy. So one of the roles that you've also recently taken on is with Microsoft in an advisory role. So I'd like to touch a little bit on AI, and in particular, what role can it play in enhancing numeracy skills?
Yeah, and actually one of the other companies I spend a little bit of time advising is Anthropic, which is one of the companies at the frontier developing AI technology. And it's fascinating seeing how quickly the technology is developing. And already that your listeners will be familiar with the various AI apps that are all out there that different people are developing to help provide financial advice. I think that's really exciting. I mean, something that used to be the purview of only very wealthy people to get that kind of tailored financial advice. You needed to have a huge amount of savings for it to be cost effective for someone to give you that advice. Now actually will be able to be democratized, and many more people who have smaller amounts of savings will still be able to access really high quality financial advice. So that's what the technology will enable us to be able to do, enable everyone to benefit from, and of course it will keep improving. But again, actually going back to our previous question, that's all good and well, but because it's people's money, it's their savings, they've worked really hard for it, and they worry about it not being there or needing it when times are tough. I think people are still going to want to have that confidence to trust what they're being told. or to know what questions to ask of the advisor, whether it's a human or a AI. We'll still need to focus on giving people that little bit of confidence with it, because money is so central to us and our financial security. I think people are going to be, reluctant to completely outsource all these decisions. They're going to want to make sure that they understand, the parameters of those decisions, what are the right questions to ask, how to think about comparing different things. So yes, amazing enabling tool that AI is going to be, and it's going to be able to make high quality financial advice available to far more people, which is great. But I think people just means that even more we need to work hard to give many more people that confidence and familiarity with these concepts, so that they can then take advantage of that great advice that they're getting, and then make great decisions, and hopefully grow their savings, increase their wealth, plan for their futures better, have a more financial security.
You touched on a really important word, actually, trust. And I think people lack trust because they ultimately lack confidence, because you don't know if you could trust someone or what they're telling you about your finances, but you don't have that confidence to challenge it if you don't trust it. And I think that's really important, because it's the confidence and the trust also go hand in hand.
They absolutely do, yeah. And I think the more confidence you have, then you're going to be much more able to trust what you're being told.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, what is your ultimate goal for the Richmond Project? Where do you hope it will be, and what do you hope it will have achieved in, say, 2 to 5 years?
Wow. Right back where we started, I talked about changing the culture around numbers, so that nobody feels like they're not a numbers person, or maths isn't for them, or numbers aren't for them. I really hope we can play a part in changing that culture, so that nobody feels like that, because numbers are for everyone. I think everyone, regardless of who they are, where they live, or their background, can be confident with numbers. And if we can help give them that confidence, I know they're going to be able to have better lives. They're going to be able to plan for their futures better, help their kids in the way that they want to, save up for the holiday, do a better job with their shopping, budgeting, saving and investing, as we've been talking about, get a different job, earn more money, whatever it might be in your life. Having more confidence with numbers is, I think, going to help you live a more fulfilling life. And if we can break down those barriers, change the culture, that unlocks opportunities and possibilities for people, which I think are really positive. So, that's the kind of journey that we're starting out on. And I'm really delighted we've got a great team that are working with Akshay and I to bring this to life. And we're talking to lots of organizations that we can partner with and support, because there are lots of good people already doing work in this space, and hopefully use our voices, like I'm doing with you, to kind of amplify these issues and get more people thinking and talking about them. And I think over time, as well as funding other people's projects and programs, we may well develop some of our own. And the more learning that we do, starting with our Number Nation survey that I talked about, which is going to be the biggest ever survey of our country's attitudes towards numeracy, that will give us some ideas about how to target our help most effectively after having listened and learned from everyone. So I'm really excited about the next few years, about what we can create, what we can contribute, and hopefully make a difference to people up and down the country.
And I'm really excited to find what the equivalent of World Book Day will be for numbers.
Yeah, well, we'll have to come back and talk about that.
Come back and talk about that. So, and I always like to end the podcast with a few fun questions.
Okay, let's do it.
So, are you ready?
Are you saying this hasn't been fun so far, Kalpana?
It's all been fun. You know it has. It's all been really fun. This is, let's just say non-finance.
Right, okay.
Okay, so your life is about to become a movie. Who would play you?
Ooh, I've been asked this once before, and I think I'll stick with the same answer, which is Dev Patel.
I like Dev Patel.
Who obviously is a lot younger and better looking than I am. But we'll go with him. He's a great actor.
I think he'd do a brilliant job.
Well, I'd be over the moon.
Thank you. So
I also did actually meet the gentleman who played Rishi in Industry recently at an event, and he was also an incredibly nice guy. And I watched his show as well, and he was great too.
He could be the default.
So there's a couple of options.
There's a couple of options there. Great. So if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Teleporting.
Teleporting.
Yeah, if I could be anywhere that I wanted to be like that.
I like that.
And ideally, if
Wish
I could, if whoever I was holding hands with at that time would be able to come with me, actually, otherwise it would probably be a bit less helpful as a superpower. But yeah, if I could do that, that would be quite neat.
Yeah, I like that. I wish I could do that as well.
That would, I'd quite like that.
Great. What was your dream job when you were 10?
When I was 10.
Yeah.
10. 10. I've been 10. It was very clear. 10 was all about. I talked about Star Wars earlier, didn't I? And so 10, I was very much focused on being a Jedi Knight and an X-wing pilot combined, kind of like Luke Skywalker. That was what I was gunning for. And then I, at some point, realised that was sadly not going to happen.
You beat it, Bodhi. You've done well. So my final question is, which job is harder, Prime Minister or Chancellor?
Well, look, given that we've been talking about lots of financial concepts all interview, probably the thing that comes to mind is being Chancellor during a pandemic, and obviously being a relatively, well, not very new Chancellor. I'd only been in the job a few weeks, and then COVID hit, and I was obviously, it was one thing just being made Chancellor all of a sudden, and then the next thing we had this once in a century pandemic strike, which none of us had encountered before, and there wasn't a textbook or a playbook you could pull out of the bookcase and tell you what to do. So that was not easy, not easy for anyone really in any job, but particularly just having got that very important job and feeling a responsibility to help get the country through what was a really tough time for so many of us, and have to come up with ideas and policies quickly and then make sure they worked, and very early on, that was particularly challenging.
Great. Well, actually, I'm glad you said Chancellor, because that means I can give you this in confidence. I hope you like it. So
actually, that's exactly from that period.
Exactly, and that's you as Chancellor.
There it is,
that's
with
for
the
you.
red box. Well, thank you. That is brilliant. Well, great. Well, we'll find somewhere fun to put this up. Look at this. Excellent. God, that takes me back, doesn't it? Yeah. That's very kind. Thank you very much.
Welcome. So thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting to you.
It's been great chatting to you too.
Thank you so much for your time. And that's been great.
No, well, I've really enjoyed it. No, thank you too.